Well, at this point in the 2020 season, we can't say that it's not expected. We can't say that it's a rarity, unfortunately, but it's still disappointing when we get a cancellation of a football game, especially between SEC Western Division rivals, Texas A&M and Ole Miss, not going to play this Saturday. But we'll still talk some Aggie football with Leah Musgrave from TexAgs.com. Leah, appreciate you stopping by. Certainly a tremendous second half against Auburn that was good for the resume build. People were looking at, okay, Auburn's not one of the better teams or not a vintage Auburn team, but still a decent team, a quality team, and a quality win. And to watch the game, it kind of belies maybe a game that on the scoreboard came down to the final 5 or 6 minutes, because Texas A&M really controlled the game and statistically dominated at times.
Yeah, they did. And the fourth quarter really is what characterized this game. And, you know, the big national narrative right now is the convincing wins. And maybe if you were watching it early, you were not so convinced that A&M was in control the entire time. But when you look at it on paper, A&M won 31-20. They completely dominated the fourth quarter, and they outscored Auburn in the fourth quarter 17-0. They went on the road to a respected place to play in college football. Bo Nix is a completely different animal at home. And you won by 11 points. And you know what? I think it's kind of hard to argue that that wasn't a convincing win for A&M.
Yeah, Isaiah Spiller with a nice game on the ground against a quality defense, and Kellen Mond rebounding nicely after a poor performance against LSU. Your thoughts about the passing game in particular?
Yeah, I think it was a really good bounce back performance for the Aggie offense, especially on the ground. They were so sharp. They had 500 yards of total offense. About 300 of those were rushing yards. And I personally loved just watching the 1-2 punch of Isaiah Spiller and Devon Achane. That's just been so fun to watch. Even had Isaiah Spiller in their lead blocking at fullback a couple times and getting Anaya Smith in there involved. It was just a fun, explosive performance to watch from the Aggie offense. Kellen Mond, like you said, outstanding, played really well, especially in that fourth quarter. And this is a place that he has struggled in the past too. This team has given him fits over the last 3 years. And the Aggie offensive line is playing just as good, if not better, than anyone in the country right now. So that was a really good bounce back performance for the Aggie offense. A little bit different on the other side of the ball, though.
Yeah, that was certainly an emphasis on the game broadcast, how good the Aggie offensive line has developed this year, and how well they dominated the game up front against Auburn and controlled the game, especially in the fourth quarter, as you mentioned. The defense, now this cancellation of the game against Ole Miss, I don't think necessarily hurts the overall resume, that it would be an expected huge matchup against a team that would be likely to challenge them. Texas A&M would be a substantial favorite in the game, but from a defensive standpoint against that Ole Miss offense that's been extremely explosive, I'm sure, you know, myself and others were curious to see that matchup unfold.
Yeah, and obviously you want to play every game, right? And we're kind of getting to the point where they built in these bye weeks so that you could make things up, but we're kind of to the point where that's not necessarily going to happen anymore. When we look at this from a resume standpoint, it's a matchup I wanted to see because, like you said, Ole Miss has an offense that can score. And we know that Lane Kiffin is a competitor. I really think that if his numbers were in the 40s, that he still would have made the trip to College Station just because they would have wanted to compete. It was actually the state of Mississippi that kind of had to step in there and say, hey, you've got some issues and this just needs to be called off. I think this was an important game because it kept you in the college football playoff conversation. And really the only ranking that actually matters is the one that comes out on December 20th. But it's still something that you wanted to see because I think it could only be a resume booster. I still think it's hard to envision a scenario where this really affects where the Aggies stand in the eyes of the committee, especially because this was not A&M's fault. And not to put the blame on Ole Miss, but this was entirely out of A&M's control. And I think, too, no matter what you do against Ole Miss, it's really not going to push you over Ohio State or anybody above you. You're going to need a little bit of help on the top end to trickle down a little bit and kind of help you out if you actually want to end up in the Final Four. But like I said, that final ranking is going to be revealed on December 20th, and that's the day after A&M plays Tennessee on the road. And that's a Tennessee team that actually showed up pretty well against Florida last weekend. So obviously not an ideal situation, but it's not the end of the world. I think right now what A&M needs to do is just stay focused, line up, beat the Volunteers, and then just kind of wait and see what happens, honestly.
Absolutely. They can only take care of business. And now it may play into their advantage that they're playing on championship game weekend, the day before the committee makes the final selection. And again, like you say, if things play out to form, they really don't have a legitimate shot. But if we get a little bit of chaos here and there, maybe Notre Dame gets blown out. Maybe there's a comparison that needs to be made against a Cincinnati or a USC, where even a one loss over an undefeated team certainly would favor Texas A&M based on strength of schedule. And then if they can have that convincing win against the Tennessee team that's talented, although only with a couple wins on the season. Leah, we appreciate you stopping by. Unfortunately, no football this weekend, but hopefully the Aggies get back on the field against Tennessee and can finish this thing out.
Hopefully we get some kind of senior night or senior day or something. My heart kind of hurts a little bit for the seniors who lost their last game at Kyle Field. So we'll see what happens, but looking forward now to A&M and Tennessee next weekend.